Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Glenn Carlson. You're listening to the Dent Podcast, and you might be watching it as well. In this conversation, I talk with Tammy Banks. Tammy is an entrepreneur. She's a trainer. She's the founder of 𝗱𝗊𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 Training. And if I could just summarize her story very quickly. From homeless to fighting her way, almost literally, into college, then university, becoming the CEO of a charity with over 400 people in the organization, starting her own successful training business and advising to the British Parliament, and becoming a best-selling author and doing a TEDx talk. So if you're kind of interested in the entrepreneur journey of a human being that has had to quite literally fight, not just the world, but for her own mind, her own well-being, her own health and safety throughout her life, I think you're going to get a huge amount of value for this conversation with Tammy Banks. So allow me to quickly change my wardrobe, and I'll see you on the other side. Here's Tammy. Tammy, I'm stoked you're here.
Thanks, Glenn. It's great to be here.
You've got such an incredible story. I'd love it maybe if you could just open with a little bit around, how you introduce yourself to people these days. If you're out and about and someone says, like, what do you do? What does Tammy say?
So now I introduce myself by saying that I am an entrepreneur and that I help people transform their training so that it's exceptional, quality and values led, and the delegates get everything they need from that session to be able to transform lives.
And you do that in some pretty specific areas as well, don't you? It's not just kind of anyone, anywhere.
Yeah, so the methodology that we've developed can actually be used by anyone everywhere, and that's the magic of it. But actually it's derived from the fact that for the last 5 years, I've run a training company that recruits operational experts, people who have professional or personal experience of complex situations, and then they train people working in key working services, so like police, probation, homeless services workers, etc. And the training that the training company delivers is all about helping frontline workers deliver safe and quality values-led training that helps the most vulnerable and complex people be safe from harm and to transform their lives.
Not only is it just a really important space, but your methodology and the way you go about it is just super cool. What's also super cool is the title of your TED Talk, Why Kindness Makes All the Difference. And the tagline to that was from homeless to Parliament. Now, you haven't just gone from being homeless, which of course now everybody's just like, what? To Parliament, but you've also gone from homeless to being a TEDx speaker, to being a best-selling author, to being a successful business owner, and to keeping the politicians in line. So can you maybe start at the start of that? Homeless for 4 years.
Yeah. So I guess that digs right into my origin story, Glenn. So to talk KPI language, from a mountain of value, my origin story is that unfortunately my childhood was very abusive and very harmful, and because of that I ended up living on the streets from the age of 14 as a teenager, and actually living on the streets. When I look back at it now and I reflect on it, and when I talk about it now, people go, oh my gosh, that must have been awful. But actually it was better than living at home. So we make choices at different points. And as a child, my choices were limited and I had to focus on survival. And survival for me meant spending a period of 4 years homeless, initially on the streets and then in lots of different homeless hostels. And that's my origin story, because from that, it's a long, complex story, but I left school when I became homeless, so I don't have any formative education, but education has always been something that is really powerful for me. When I was really young, it was my escape, and I've always been quite naturally inquisitive, and I lost myself in books to escape the reality when I was really young. And so I was asked to leave school after quite a violent outburst when I was 14 and a half. I was in a bad space, as you can imagine.
As you would
and,
be.
Yeah. But then when I was homeless, I actually went into college. I stomped in quite aggressively and insisted that they enrol me. They refused, and the security guards took me out the door again. And I don't blame them though, Glenn. Do you know, when I look back on myself then, I can see exactly why they did that. I was 5'3", nearly 16, and quite aggressive walking into that college. And the only way I knew how to survive back then was fighting, and so that was kind of my mode of operandi. But fortunately for me, there was one of the tutors just wandering past reception at that point, and she followed me out, and she stood back a few meters, and she just said to me, "If you really want to learn, I'll help you." I told her where to go. I was really angry and really upset, but for the first time in my entire life at that point, she was the only adult that wasn't trying to exploit me and gave me hope. And at that point, I had nothing else. And so that she really started off the domino effect that transformed my life. And that's what I talk about within the Homeless to Parliament TEDx talk. And that's why I do what I do now, is because I truly feel in every fibre of my body that as individuals, we absolutely have the power to support other people to transform their lives or live their best lives. And it doesn't have to be difficult either. At that point, all she did was offer me a little bit of hope. Very honestly, I stomped away, and it was weeks before I went back there. And then I just started circling the perimeter of the college in the hope that she would notice me. And she did, do you know, and the rest is history, in the sense of I then skipped forward, won a few awards, got into university with no GCSEs, trained to be a psychologist, and So where we are today.
So hang on a minute, right? You just kind of, we've just laid a parking lot across a huge part of that story, I think. I'm actually interested in, well, there's something about the human spirit that causes like a woman like that, or anyone like that, to see an aggressive brat like yourself, and then go up and walk outside and kind of offer a hand. And I'm just curious in terms of, I'm assuming you still know her.
I do, yeah.
So can you go into maybe a little more detail? Because like my passion with KPI and Dent, business and entrepreneurship, yes, and we'll get to some of that sort of stuff, but I'm passionate about transformation. I'm passionate about impact. And I'm passionate about, I'm interested in the decisions that we make that can radically change our experience in the world. And so you kind of went from, I'm imagining this short little angry Doc Marten wearing sort of, obviously I don't know what you're actually wearing, but I can imagine the persona. And then you just kind of went, and I'm winning awards and blah, 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 and university, and away we go, right? But just zoom into that a little bit, if you can, from the perspective of reshaping the way you think about the world, because I'm assuming that had to happen in there somewhere. Some decisions had to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly the story that my TEDx talk tells, is the fact that was gradual, and it was down to a few different things. And one of them was the opportunity to change. One of them was the environment, so the people I then became surrounded by, and I'll go into that in a moment. And one of them was about relationships, and they were the three things that were absolutely core to me going through that transformation. But first of all, I guess going back to what you asked at the beginning with regards to her as an individual, you've hit the nail on the head with regards to exactly why I do what I do now, and that's because frontline professionals, they're perfectly positioned to be able to help people transform their lives at any point. She didn't do anything magic on that day. She literally just held out a branch to me, but she had the ability to do that. She had the skills to be able to bridge that gap between her, she would have been in her late 30s then, and a 16-year-old. She could bridge that gap. She could have that conversation. She had the resilience and the wherewithal about her to do that. You know, she wasn't overworked and under pressure and just rushing past and not seeing. And she also had the values and the desire to want to do that, because she was in her job for the reason of helping young people achieve their potential. So actually, before I look at the tools that I had as an individual then, and I used within that kind of changing context of my life, I'm forever grateful that she had the tools that she had, and that's where everything I'm doing goes full circle, and that's why the training methodology exists as well.
Yeah, I love it.
But to answer your question about myself, those three things changed for me, and it was that opportunity, that environment, and that positive relationship. You have to, if you can imagine for a moment, you know, being kind of just short of your 16th birthday and not really yet having an adult role model in your life. And so I was very, very skeptical and wary and fearful of adults, and my experience was that they all wanted something, and so it absolutely blew my mind that she didn't. And over the period of the next 3 years, she kept she offered me an opportunity where she said, if you really want to learn, you can come and you can sit at the back of my class, and whilst you sit at the back of my class, I will help you appeal the reason why the college have said that you can't attend. And the college by that point had said I can't attend because I didn't finish school, therefore I wouldn't be capable of the level of learning that the college were teaching at that point. And so she said, sit in the back of my class, an appeal takes 6 weeks, turn up every day and I'll help you do an appeal. And one of the things that really spurred me on at that point, she really knew how to press my buttons, was a challenge. And as soon as somebody said I couldn't do something, I was going to do it, come hell or high water. They had said I couldn't join college. This was an opportunity for me to prove them wrong. So I turned up for 6 weeks. Within that 6 weeks, I'd completed her course, which was a 1-year A-level course. I'd completed it to level A standard, only in a mock version, but enough for us to take to the appeals and say, really, she can't cope with this information. It didn't even get to appeals. They just looked at it and went, yeah, okay, she can join college. But they put lots of stipulations in, like anger management and behavioural therapy and stuff like that I had to attend to be able to
which
go
is
to
probably
college.
not unreasonable, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and remember, like, all of the time I was at college, I was living homeless, and so that's one of the really important elements here, and actually something that I heard reframed when I came on the KPI course was about the environment, the people you surround yourself with, because I was confident and comfortable within the homeless community. I knew where I stood, I knew what the rules were, I knew how to survive, and I knew how to look after myself and to protect myself from other people. I had no clue how to survive in a college of people who wanted to learn, who had families and parents and carers that loved them. All of that blew my mind, and there were so many times where I was in this kind of sliding doors moment where I was up all night, stealing to survive, doing things and taking things and interacting in ways that I look back on now and I think, gosh, I was so lucky that I survived. But I was doing what I needed to survive, not harming anybody at all, but for me as an individual, doing what I needed to survive. And then I'd be rocking up at college at 9 o'clock in the morning with people. I would be skin and bones, and I wouldn't have eaten and I wouldn't have slept because I'd been fearful for my own survival. And people were turning up in shoes that cost hundreds of pounds and telling of where they'd been for the weekend and things like that. And so there was so many times where it left me in a position where actually I didn't know if I could continue, and she was still there, and she didn't do anything particularly magic. She just told me I could, and she was the first person that actually had any belief in me as an individual, and so she helped me start to believe in myself.
And I just love the fact that at the very start of your meeting, she let you go away for 2 weeks. Like, well, didn't chase. It's like, here's the space, that seeing another human being that you weren't ready for at the time, chewed on it for 2 weeks, came back. And there's something pretty powerful. I mean, obviously you're in training. There's something pretty powerful about being able to create that space, but not, I guess, have the attachment to needing to fix, to needing to chase, and creating that space for the student to appear, I suppose. I'm curious, when you're in college with those people that had the shoes and the homes and the food in their stomach, like, how was that? It's like you being there with those people, and my brain goes, it's like, is there jealousy? Is there resentment? Is there like imposter? Like what is that even? I can't. Well, I can imagine slightly. I didn't have a great experience in school, but nothing close to what you're talking about.
If I'm honest, Glenn, for me, when I look back at the time in college, there wasn't any of those feelings, because I was every single part of me was on high alert continually just to survive. And so your body makes decisions and your mind makes decisions with regards to kind of fight or flight and such like. And at that point, every single part of my emotional energy was going into survival. So I couldn't, I didn't have the headspace. Yeah, I didn't have the headspace, but certainly when I had the offer of university, which was something that honestly, nobody I knew had ever been to university, and in fact it wasn't anything that had ever been discussed. And Jane, the college tutor, had put in an application for an award for me, which would then allow me to go to university without the formative qualifications. And I didn't know that this had happened. So this was another example of her having faith in me. And I won a place at university, and the first week that I was there, because I didn't have my safety net of living homeless. I know that sounds really ridiculous, but when I was at college, I was living in a homeless hostel, and on an evening and a weekend, I was with people like me. And that's how I identified. I was with people like me during the day, and for 2 years during the day, I was at college. The vast majority of the time I attended, and I was surrounded by people that weren't like me. But your environment changes you and you learn. And I'm a lifelong learner. I've always been like that. I drink information. And so I was taking in my surroundings all of the time. And so that balance of my identity was starting to shift as I was getting to know this kind of other group of people and going to the cinema for the first time, daft things like that they start to seep in with you. But the crisis, I guess the crunch point came when I won this place at university, and I had to move out of the homeless hostel and move into the halls of residence. And then that was even more extreme, because everybody at university, at college there was a whole spectrum of different demographics, all of them in better positions than I were at the point. But at university, there wasn't that spectrum of demographics. Everybody within my halls of residence met at that that point, the stereotypical kind of middle class person who was always going to university, and some of them really didn't value the opportunity. And honestly, everybody came in with Range Rovers and care packages. And very honestly, I sat in my wardrobe, I cried, and there were numerous points when I considered taking my own life. And what's interesting about that is, prior to going to university, when I first became homeless, the last time I'd considered taking my own life was the day before my 16th birthday, which again, I talk about in my TEDx. All the way through being homeless, I didn't feel that vulnerable. I'd put on a mask by that point. I'd learned to live within this setting. And it wasn't until I got to university that suddenly it felt like I couldn't cope again. The rug was pulled out. So that was the next phase, I guess, of learning again and battling through and allowing my environment to influence me and having a little bit of faith in myself, because by that point Jane was ever the professional, and we didn't have any contact with each other at that point, and didn't have any contact with each other again for about 12 or 13 years after that. So it wasn't that I was on my own, because she had helped me build the skills. She had connected me with the pastoral care at the university and things like that. But actually, I felt completely alone and completely out of place at that point.
What's the bridge that then brought you to starting a business? How did you kind of go through uni, and how did your entrepreneur journey begin?
Do you know, when I look back now, it's quite funny, because I think that perhaps I was always a bit of a natural entrepreneur, in the sense of I'm always looking for solutions. And so when I look back now, I can see that. But actually, the journey was one that I never expected to happen and didn't even realise was a possibility. So a little bit like going to university. After leaving uni, I started working in a secure unit for young people. So my whole desire for going to university was actually to study and learn and understand why people harmed me as an individual. That was my desire. I went to university and I studied psychology, and then I studied forensic psychology. And my kind of, I guess, the way that my mind works is, if you don't understand something, then seek to understand it as much as you can, and find that knowledge from a lot of different places, so that it's not only your frame of reference. And so I went to university and studied psychology, and then from there, I then went to work with young people who were in a secure unit. So they'd committed a crime, or they were a risk to themselves. And then from there, I went into training as a forensic psychologist in a prison, working with people who'd convicted of perpetrating sexual offences, high-risk people. And so you can see that I've got a little bit of a theme of jumping into the fire.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm like, God damn, hectic. Like,
yeah.
Study liberal arts or something. God damn.
Give myself a break. But no, yeah. I have, I like to see a challenge, and then I like to I believe that if you want to see change in the world, you have to be part of that change. And I didn't understand. I was hurting. I was really hurting in my early 20s. Still didn't understand why. Do you know, even just the concept of trying to understand why your parents don't have that unconditional love for you before you then go into wider people who have harmed and abused you is really hard to process. And for my own benefit, I recognised that I had to be able to process it, I had to be able to understand it, and I had to be able to move past it. And so that was where my learning came. And then my deep desire right from back then was to help people, young people in the same position as me, avoid being harmed in the same way. And that was what led my early career, very much all of my learnings and then my experience, and then going to the prison to do to work with the people I worked with was very much about gaining that knowledge to be able to prevent harm, abuse and neglect happening to other young people who were in the same situation as me. So I then spent 20 years doing that, but I did it. I guess my career history goes from operational right up to strategic. So I jumped around because what I did was I worked very operationally, delivering therapy for a number of years. I then fell pregnant with my eldest daughter, who's now 15, and I couldn't deliver therapy to people convicted of sexual offences. It changed my mindset at that point, and I had to step away from it. I went through a period of burnout and breakdown. My marriage broke up. I was married at the time. I'm married again, but to a wonderful man now. My marriage broke up, and I found myself really struggling again, and I had to survive in a different way for different reasons. But I carried on working with people who have complex needs. So I then moved into managing homeless services for the local authority. So you'll see the two themes here about the abuse and the homelessness. And for 7 years, I managed homeless hostels and worked with people with complex needs, families and young people who were experiencing homelessness. But I was banging my head on a brick wall because there was constrictions within statutory services that me, with my background, I just wouldn't accept. So if there was poor practice, I would be the first to say. I was always there as an advocate for the service user. And so right from my days working in the young offenders unit, there was one incident where there was a young lad who had been addicted to heroin since the age of 2. His parents had purposely injected him so that he, in his tiny little small state, could climb through the windows and do the stealing. What
the fuck is wrong with people? Ugh.
This was the world I was living in, Glenn. The reason I give you that example is because he came to the secure unit broken, really broken, to the extent that he did not know how to use a knife and fork. He came to the secure unit when he was 14, that's what I should say. He was 14, but he looked 8. Because he'd used so much heroin, his body hadn't gone through the hormonal process. He couldn't eat, he couldn't use a knife and fork, and he could barely have a conversation with you. And I became his key worker and spent 8 to 12 hours a day with him. If you think I was broken and fearful of adults and such like, I had nothing on the pain and trauma that he experienced. But skip forward 6 months. His grandma died whilst he was locked up, and she was the only positive influence in his life. And we put in a request for him to go to the funeral. He needed to be able to process that, and it was denied. So I took a night shift and took him anyway, which kind of comes down to my point.
Oh, Tammy, I love you.
But my point is that I was always about actually the services.
Hang on. How'd you get him out?
Well, I knew all of the details and all of the authorization passes for the security who would have to come with us. So I just rung up and said it had been authorized, and I did it at 5 o'clock in the morning and sent an email to the head of social care saying, I absolutely recognise why you've said no. I realise you think he's a flight risk. I realise you think he's going to be secreting heroin, etc., etc. However, this lad needs this, and this will be the making of breaking for the rest of his life. Fire me if you need to. And then when we got back, granted, he was 15 by this point. I'd made him, we had a really strong professional relationship, and he knew what was on the line. There was no way he was going to break that, no way. And he was a huge flight risk, but I gave him what Jane gave me. I had faith in him. And I came back and they didn't fire me, and it did start a huge investigation into putting the needs of young people before the risk management process. And so that's my the reason I was saying that is that working in statutory services, I ended up just getting so frustrated, Glenn. Do you know, there were policies and processes and guidance and such like, and restrictions that were not in the best interest of the person accessing that service. And there was, for arbitrary reasons, you know, managing a 55-bedded homeless hostel for teenagers, and 3 warnings and then you're evicted. Well, do you know, my teenagers, if they swear at me 3 times, I'm not making them sleep on the streets. Do you know, so I'm not doing that to any other 16-year-old either. Do you know, yes, they can paint a wall to show that they're sorry. Yes, they can come and apologise and have to explain how they're feeling. Yes, they can come to a session and we'll teach them about managing their emotions, but I'm not making them sleep on the streets because they've sworn at me.
Let them be an angry teenager. That's kind of what teenagers do.
Yeah, but there's a real balance within services. You have to balance the professional nature and the parameters that have to be there, because we all need boundaries, and it's really important, particularly for teenagers, but for all of us, that we have boundaries. But, you know, make them fair and relatable and justifiable, and, you know, have that conversation and do what we can do to enable somebody to be able to progress in their life, not put barriers in for the sake of it. So be no surprise that a charity came and recruited me. They went, we've seen what you do, and we've seen the impact you have, and please can you come and design our homeless services? So that was kind of my step then into working. I then did 7 years within the charity sector, initially designing homeless services for young people, and then as CEO of a regional charity working to prevent sexual harm. So again, full circle.
Certainly the theme. And it's kind of like you've gone from university to the public sector to charity. You're kind of edging your way closer to business. It's kind of you've gone from one side of the spectrum slowly through every stone in the pond on the way to business as a force for good.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it feels when I look back now. That's exactly how it feels when I'm looking at the journey, because then what happened within the charity world, and the reason why I started delivering training at all, was the same old frustration. You know, I was CEO of an organisation then who had 400 people working to prevent sexual harm within the community, and they were doing that by working with people who are at risk of causing it, so that there would be that no more victims aim. And I was sending them out on training so that they could, from a child protection perspective, risk management, managing challenging behaviour, all of those type of things. And they would come back huffing and puffing and saying the training was rubbish, and they would say that they didn't understand it, it wasn't relatable, it was a waste of their time, and there's nothing more precious in this life than time. We don't get it back, you know, and when you work for a charity you count every single penny, and so you should do as well. And so it felt like I was throwing my money out the window and I was wasting their time. And then, just to add insult to injury, they then weren't working with any service users that day, so people weren't getting the service that they needed. And so I was just fed up of it. I was just really frustrated. My best friend at the time was a learning and development manager for homeless services, and we were over a glass of wine ranting about this, and she was saying how she can't find good training anywhere. She purchases it for the organisation and she can't find good training anywhere. It looks good on the internet, but then it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So between us, whilst both working full-time jobs, we joined together and we just started delivering a little bit of training, and we just started skill swapping with other organisations who knew things that we didn't know that we needed to know, and vice versa. And we just literally started doing that alongside our full-time jobs. So we wasn't ever supposed to be a business. And I didn't even really know what business was. And so when I talk about 𝗀𝗃 now, I call it an accidental business, because what actually happened was there was a gap. We filled that gap. And then over the period of about 2.5, 3 years, people just kept asking for more training. And so we just asked other colleagues and professionals who had the operational knowledge. They were working in the field. We just asked them if they wanted to deliver some too. And then suddenly we had 20 people delivering training for us. And we're like, huh? How did this happen? And that was when I started. That's when I came across the KPI book, and that's when my mindset started to change. And I guess the frustration part and what I recognised there, and I guess what the words of Daniel Priestley in the book is that, and I had to learn, was that you can do good through business. So in my mind at that point, very honestly, charity was about doing good. Business was about earning money and making profit. And so I had to do that transition a little bit like I did from homelessness to kind of living a different life. And then statutory service into charity service. I kind of had to do the exact same between charity and business. And I struggled with that a little bit. And then I went on the KPI journey, and that really has led me to where I am today.
I'm going to be honest, like in the early days, I had the same issues with business. I was in business, but it never felt quite right because business was always, you look around and business was constantly profiting at the expense of human and natural resources, right? I mean, that was it. And the entire structure, the stock market, the need to be able to demonstrate infinite growth for shareholders and profits, etc. I mean, it was just designed to eat the world and spit up and chew out people, which is, I mean, there's so much evidence that is in fact what capitalism causes. But then at the other hand, standard of living, opportunity, etc. And it wasn't until I realized that, but you can decide not to do it that way. Right? You can decide, yes, to make money, yes, to be profitable, yes, to create a vehicle that has leveraged impact, and you can do it as a values-led, purpose-driven organization that, isn't going to treat people on the planet with, with that kind of disrespect, I think. And, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I have agency. I can decide how I'm going to be in business. It's not just a stereotype where the moment you start a business you have to adopt the monopoly man stereotype, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think again we do have to realize that, don't we? We have to when we're ready to, we have to kind of let that process, and that was what bridged the gap for me. So when I started KPI November 2019. All the years are merging into one at the moment with the pandemic, but
right.
November 2019, when I started, I was still working full time for a charity. In fact, no, I started in October 2019, and then by the end of November 2019, being part of KPI gave me the confidence to walk away from my full time job. And that's no small thing for me. So I don't have the safety net of my family. I am estranged from my family. Everything I've earned myself. If I don't bring in income, then my family will suffer, and there isn't some little pot of money in the corner that somebody's going to leave me or anything like that. So walking away from a full-time job that was a reasonably well-paid one to then take over the business full time and make what we'd built into a business. So that was what was really quite mind blowing for me, was that recognition of the fact that we'd accidentally built up something that people were really, really clamoring for. People were banging on our doors saying this is what we need, and we'd accidentally built that up, and there was something really magical and special about it, and I just wasn't sure what that was. I couldn't put my finger on it because for me, we were just all doing what we wanted to receive. So we were giving what we wanted to receive, and so that was quite natural to me. And it wasn't until after I read the KPI book, there was about 8 or 9 months before I started the program. So I went through the whole, you proper did a funnel on me. I went through that whole funnel of learning a bit more, listening to all of the Dent podcast, going to the day with Daniel, all of those type of things. But whilst I was going through that, the book had made me go, well, hang on, what is different about what we do compared to what other training companies do? And it made me kind of go, oh, we are a training company. Do you know, how did that happen?
How did that happen?
We are yeah. Hang on a minute.
Oh,
yeah. So I kind of realised what I had, and then went, but why? What is it that will? I didn't want to get to KPI, and I still have no clue, because I was putting my time and my money in it, and I value training so much, and so I was like, what is it? So I started off. I fell back onto my background in psychology, and we started off evaluating and analysing all of the TAY training sessions. So we had delivered thousands by then, and we had, as I said, these 20 amazing facilitators, and so we started this evaluation and analysis program to see what it was that was different about what we were doing, but also what it was that was the same about what the facilitators were doing. And that was the start, and that was where our methodology derived from, and that was when the penny dropped for me that actually one of my own, I guess, cognitive distortions about charity and business was about the fact that I had to stay in the charity to keep doing good. And that was when I realised that actually the impact we could have with the training company could far out influence the impact I can have as an individual within a charity. And that was just quite mind-blowing to recognise that, really. Recognise the scale of that impact if I viewed things through a different lens.
Well, I'm glad you had that shift, and I'm glad you're now sharing it in such a way. I mean, not just with your book and not just with your TED Talk and, all the other places, but, just being here, because I think if business owners have the opportunity to really realize that they do have the capability, they are on a leverage vehicle to make an impact, the more people get that. I mean, the world needs a bit of help right now, right? And the people on it need a bit of help right now. And so the more we can get that collectively, I think, the more impact we can make. So I'm stoked. One thing I'm curious, how did you get 20 people? Like, there was an industry that they couldn't find training, and then all of a sudden you find 20 great trainers, because most people are like, how do I scale this? How do I get other people to deliver great value? Normally they're really good at it and everyone else is shite, right? So how did that happen?
Well, there's two different points here with regards to scalability. So initially, when we grew, it wasn't purposeful. So bearing in mind that I'd been working in the sector over 15 years, and I'd worked with really good people, and we attract people like ourselves. So I was surrounded by people who were doing what they were doing for the very best reasons, and really wanted to make change and help people and such like. And so initially, it was more a case of me going to people that I know and literally saying to them, do you know that subject you know all about? How about going and telling somebody else all about it?
Okay.
And supporting them to do that. And we became kind of the conduit for them to be able to do that and help them. And we very quickly took on a full-time executive assistant to manage all of that kind of noise and process, I guess. But when the shift came and we decided for me to go full-time in the business, and we were looking at scaling again, we knew that we needed to. So that analysis and evaluation wasn't just about finding out what was special. It was also about developing a quality standard, because when we got to about 15, that's when we then started seeing some of that sand moving. We'd get the odd complaint coming in, and I was mortified at that point, because obviously everything was emotionally connected at that point, and I couldn't understand how could somebody say anything negative about our phenomenal trainers. And then the penny dropped, because I also had an organisation of 400. The penny dropped that actually we're not we weren't investing anything into them at that point. It really was a group of people, like-minded people, wanting to support other like-minded organisations, and that's when it was so key and that's why there was that really big decision to make about leaving the work that I was doing and moving into the business, because we couldn't have grown any more and probably couldn't have continued at that size for any length of time without then having some serious structure, some serious processes, some serious quality standards. And that's so when we were evaluating and deriving the methodology, we were developing it very much for internal use initially, so that we could then train any other people that we wanted to recruit in. We could then train them to deliver in the same way that that our customers expected by that point. And it will be no surprise to you, Glenn, that analysis and that evaluation immediately threw up that our biggest, strongest USP were our values, and then very, very quickly seconded by our operational expertise. So, you know, that says it all, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. That's why you started in the first place. I'm always curious, right? Because in what we do, obviously, we really see the power of a founder, a owner leading from the front, you know, being the brand, being the influencer, taking responsibility for being the evangelist for what they do. But that's not a path a lot of business owners want to take. You know, a lot of business owners want to stay invisible. They want to work behind the scenes. They don't want to be known. They want to try and build it with systems and processes. And the idea of them, you know, evangelizing their business is kind of like, So what was it that caused you to kind of go the route of, no, I'm gonna lead from the front on this, key person of influence type stuff, as opposed to, you know, the other way?
I think for me, that part wasn't so hard because I was already there within the charity sector. So okay. I was already on the parliamentary committee for standards. So I was used to standing up and holding my ground. I've given you examples of how I've done that in different kind of circumstances. I was, at that point, I'd been, for 6 years, I was the CEO of a charity preventing sexual harm by working with people who are at risk of causing it. So if you can imagine, nobody wanted to talk to me. And so my job was to get people to want to talk to me. So I was used to being on stages. I was used to talking to people about probably the hardest subject to talk to anybody about. People don't want to talk about that. And I completely understand why, but we're not going to make the change and prevent further victims if we don't talk about it. And so I'd already spent years either in the newspaper or on a stage or something talking about this situation and how to then prevent further victims, and having conversations with reporters and journalists and such like, where they're saying things to me like, it's awful, you just need to push them all off a bridge and and me having to be on Radio 4 and going, I'm not saying that I disagree with you, but what I'm saying is then you'll go to prison. And you know, and so it's very much about recognising, and I was very used to being in difficult situations and saying very openly, do you know, there are good people and there are bad people, but in amongst all of that, there were a lot of harmed people as well. And having those difficult conversations with people and really being able to explore from my own personal experience and then what I was trying to achieve gave me a level of confidence in being able to, I guess, lead from the front. So I was already CEO of a charity, and I was, as I said, in the parliamentary stuff. So I was used to leading from the front. But what I didn't expect, and what hit me with a huge hammer, was massive imposter syndrome as I stepped over into the business world, because I was comfortable and had my place and knew the rules of charity work, and I knew the rules of what I was trying to achieve. And so
you've got a recurring theme here. You get comfortable in an environment, then you get yanked out of it, and you get uncomfortable, then you get comfortable in that new environment, then you yank yourself out of it, then you want, it's like rah.
Yeah, exactly that. And I love that as well. That's what absolutely, somebody once said to me, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And it's like, that is exactly me. If I feel uncomfortable, I know that I'm growing, I know that I'm developing, and I know that I'm about to take another exciting step. I might not like that step as it's happening, but actually my life has shown me that if you don't take those steps, then, you're not going to get anywhere. So yeah, I stepped into the business world, certainly, and then very honestly went through my whole kind of business mindset and such like. Is I didn't want to be doing kind of the integrator stuff because I already wasn't doing that within my day job. And what I love is I love engaging people and inspiring people and telling a story and bringing things alive. And I talked a lot previously, I'd done a lot of keynote speaking about leadership and management and about how to treat people and accomplishment after adversity and things like that. And I love the change that I see that happens when you tell those stories and people go, shit, she's talking about me, or that's where I'm at. In fact, yesterday we started our new cohort of our Train the Trainer, which I know I haven't spoke about, but we'll come to. But one of the new trainees on it, he stayed behind at the end, and he said to me, Tammy, have you got your book in front of you? And I said, oh yeah, it's on my bookshelf. And I picked it up, and he picked up my book, and he said, go to page 150. I went, what are you on about? And so I went to page 150, and he said, that page is the reason I'm here today. He said, and when I'm having a difficult day, I go to that page. And I literally sat there just going, whew. And that page was all about a day that I burnt out, and got back up again. And that's what I love. I love that, seeing that. I love that magic. But equally, very honestly, just before the Trainer course yesterday, I was sat in the car with my 12-year-old daughter, with my head in my hands, crying, going, why on earth have they all paid all this money to come and see me? So it's not
Still.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
And do you know what, Glenn? I don't think I reflected on this last night as I was falling asleep, feeling very humbled by some amazing things that people said. And as I was falling asleep, I thought to myself, I don't want that to go. I don't want it to go. I don't want it to, it doesn't, there was a day when it would have completely and utterly paralyzed me. I'm very, very glad I'm past that paralysis, because that's not helpful for anybody. But actually I don't think I want it to go, because that it brings out the best in me. That's that, you said about you get comfortable and then you challenge yourself, and you become uncomfortable. That period there, that's my challenging myself, that's my uncomfortable part. And the session was absolutely amazing. The delegates on this course, are amazing, and I have no doubt that it is going to be beyond phenomenal. And I got to feel that emotion because of the emotion I felt before. So I don't think I want that to go.
I love it. And so what would you say? Like, I mean, when did the book come out?
So the book came out last November. So I guess the bit that I'm missing here is that we did the evaluation and the analysis, and we did that because KPI says, what's special about you? Find out what's special about you. So we started looking at what's special. Now, I didn't have formative education. So one of the things that I'm aware of myself is that I struggle, and I beat myself up about my written language. And so So I knew that when I got to the published part of KPI that I would really struggle. And so I decided that I would start doing something about that in advance. And I started then engaging with somebody who was a book writer. And I literally every week for an hour took my dog for a walk, walking around the park, and just talked and talked and talked to her. And she just kind of transcribed everything that I said at that point. And that's where, by doing that, that's where I started really kind of recognizing the different elements. When we did the analysis and evaluation, when we got that, the point of that was to put it in the book. And it was at that point that I had this huge kind of groundbreaking realization that we don't want 𝗱training to be the biggest training company in the world. We don't want them to do all of the training everywhere on frontline services. And what we were deriving was a methodology that anybody could use anywhere. And that was really magical, because that then really has the opportunity for much bigger impact. And so as we were doing that, the book was being written alongside that. We were developing the methodology and writing the book. So what's in the book now is about 10% of actually what I said as I was walking around the park, and as kind of been around the houses a good few times and changed into the format that it is. But actually the book was written to share the methodology so that more people could deliver training that was having the impact that we were. Because when we did the evaluation, all of our customers came back just saying, your training is exceptional, it's relatable, it's engaging, it's expert, it's emotional, it's values led. And what we wanted was to be able to, we wanted all of our 𝗱 trainers to be able to deliver like that, and we wanted a way of training them to deliver like that. But more than that, very honestly, Glenn, I want everybody who goes on training ever to have an experience where they're like, at the end of the training, they're like, I am so glad that I've just spent 5 hours of my life, which I'm never ever going to get back. Do you know, never going to get that back. I'm so glad that I've just spent 5 hours of my life undertaking this training. It's done exactly what I needed it to do. It's relatable. It's inspired me. I can change my practice the very next day. And I want every delegate to feel that. And from a 𝗱 perspective, I want every delegate to feel that so they can be a Jane. So they can be that tutor where they've got the skills, because we might be teaching them difficult conversations or managing challenging behaviour or whatever. So they've got the skills to be able to do that. They've got the resilience to be able to do that, because as all of us, but frontline professionals, people forget about sometimes, but all of us have our own life around us, our own pressures, our own struggles, our own history, do you know, and we rock up to work and people expect us to be something different. Well, you need a level of resilience to work on the front line, and I want to be able to gift that to people that are on the front line. So I wanted them to have the skills, have the resilience, and have the values, because we also all get jaded, and you can be round a while. And there's certainly times in my career where I've had to move roles because actually I've become jaded. Like I said, with the statutory services, I'd become jaded and frustrated. And so I wasn't being my best self. And so therefore I wouldn't have been delivering the best service to the next homeless young person that came through the door. And so we had this real desire for everybody to experience training in a way that met their needs, and we developed this through 𝗱 so that we could train our trainers in that way. But then there was this moment where there was this kind of recognition that this mission is far bigger than 𝗱 training, that this mission actually is about flipping training on its head in whatever industry. It doesn't matter what industry it is. I value people, I value individuals, and whatever you're going to learn about, if you're giving up your time and potentially paying your money to be there, I want it to be brilliant. I want it to be what you want it to be and what you need it to be. And so then as we were writing the book, there was this recognition that actually the methodology, because it became literally a train the trainer methodology. The methodology was applicable for everybody anywhere who wants to deliver the very best training. And so that's what led to the book. but the book was actually due out in June of 2019, and obviously in March the pandemic hit in the UK, and from that point, very honestly, I'd left my job in the November before, and then in the March, our whole every single training session that we had booked for that year was cancelled, and I sat there again with my head in my hands going, shit, I've just left a really good, well-paid job, and now not only am I going to go broke, but so all of our facilitators. So that halted the book, that halted the methodology, that halted everything at that point, and actually changed the direction of us as a company as well.
What happened?
Oh gosh, what happened? Well, not to shy away from a challenge, Glenn. What I did was realise that we could either sink or swim. And we invested, so we already had, by that point I felt very connected to our facilitators. I know them, I know that they have families and such like as well. So we invested all of our time and money in the first few weeks of investigating online training solutions, live online ones. Now, initially, and very honestly, I didn't think it could be done because I hugely value face-to-face training. That ability to challenge people, to facilitate the group so that other people are challenging each other and helping each other grow. And all of that is the magic of facilitating exceptional training.
And you don't have to keep saying, oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. Can you turn your cat? What about? Yeah. So I didn't think it could be done, and it was a handful of our facilitators that said, yeah, you might not think it can be done, Tammy, but we haven't looked into it yet. And I was like, yeah, okay, point taken. We have a very open and honest organisation, and so we purposely have that so that we can kind of challenge each other. And so we put all of our efforts into having a look at live online platforms, and then
it's also amazing how effective innovation can be when you don't have a choice.
Yeah, because on reflection, I don't know if we would have ever gone there, Glenn, and I'm about to tell you that that's all we do at the moment, but we did, what we did was we found platforms, and then we practiced, and we fell back onto what I've said all the way through, learn, and we practiced and practiced and practiced. Nobody was booking training because they all thought the pandemic would be over in 3 weeks, yet they'd all cancelled for the year, so it just didn't make any kind of sense. But at that point we had no recollection or no understanding of the future of whether we were going to be back face to face in a month's time or whether we were going to be going live online, but I wanted to be ready for whatever option, basically. So we put our head down and we worked like crazy, and we adapted the methodology and we learned the technology so that the methodology could be met by delivering live online. And our methodology it's 4 steps. So it's expert, so delivered by an operational expert, somebody with true personal or professional experience of that subject. So the fact that you deliver on KPI is perfect because you are a KPI. So it's about that operational expertise. Expert facilitation skills. So we'll all know a lecturer, for instance, at university that knew everything about everything, but gosh, was as dry as dishwater. So expert facilitation skills is really key. And then tailored. So actually the session that you're delivering needs to be tailored to the subject. It needs to be tailored to the sector, to the landscape, to the people in the room, all of those things to make it relatable. Engaging and interactive, so we do a lot on learning styles and making sure that we meet everybody's learning styles, so everybody has an equity of being able to take away that information and being able to retain that information, because on average only 8% of information is retained after a training session, and that's not good enough. So that's our 3rd step, is about those learning styles. And then our golden thread is values, and that is that everything we do is values led. So we value ourselves as a facilitator and love what we do, because then that comes across in our delivery. We value the time of the delegates, that they're in the room giving us that time, but also we connect connect them to their values. Why are they there? Why are they doing the job that they do in the first place? What is it about what they're doing that drives them every day? And we remind them of that, because that re-inspires them. And then we wrap all of that in our methodology. So I wasn't sure, very honestly, whether we could do that live online, and I didn't think we could, if I'm honest, yeah, I can honestly say that I've had to eat my words, because we have now, and that's why the book was recalled, because we added a chapter to it. We now deliver completely live online. We will go back to face-to-face at some point in the future, and do some hybrid sessions. But we're now a year into doing this. At the end of each year, we look at our evaluation scores for the thousands of people that we've trained. At the end of 2019, when it was all face-to-face, we got a 96% excellent score across the board, which we were really proud of. 95 is our very minimum standard, so we were really pleased to get that extra percent. 2020, when 9 months of it was live online, we got 97%. So, I had to suck it up a little bit, to be fair,
Yeah.
and it's, so going back to the book, which was a question you asked in the first place, it was due out back in June, but we recalled it and added another chapter, how to deliver training for influence live online, and then launched and published in the November of last year, and really pleased, hit the bestseller, which is obviously what we're always aiming for. I think that was just because people were sick of me saying that there's a book coming out. So by the time it did, they were like, yes, buy it quick.
I love it. And by the way, the book is called Transform Your Training.
Yes.
Develop and deliver. There it is, right? Develop and deliver training that changes lives in the criminal justice, social care and charity sectors. Question: why, given the fact that the methodology is applicable across the board, why did you subtitle it with criminal justice, social care and charity sectors? Why did you niche it like that?
Oh, Glenn, because I'm a good student and I listen when I'm in class. So when I was going through the KPI program, there was so many, far too many to mention, kind of mic drop moments for me. And one of those was about the fact that, yes, absolutely, what I've developed is applicable to everybody, but actually my mission is about service users on the front line. I do what I do and have developed what I've developed. The reason why I've done that is because I want people who are accessing services, so people who need homeless services, people who are engaging with the police, people who have a social worker, the most vulnerable and complex people in society. I want them to be able to access a service with a professional who has had the training they need to be able to deliver the service that service user needs. That's my mission. And when I talk about it, I say my mission is to interrupt the generational cycle of abuse. And I look at myself there. I'm very, very lucky. I've got a wonderful husband. I've got two amazing daughters, and I have the cycle of abuse within my family has stopped with me, and my children are doing phenomenal. I've got a job. I'm contributing to society from a monetary perspective, but also hopefully from a kind of societal perspective. All of those type of things. You interrupt that cycle for one person, and I guess the vibrations or the butterfly wing effect impacts tens, hundreds, thousands, sometimes even more than that, just from interrupting with one person. And I've worked in these sectors for 20 years, and I know that so many frontline professionals are desperate to be able to do their job well, and they have pressure coming at them from all different angles, from austerity measures, political changes, etc. And so the methodology exists specifically to be a creative solution within that space. So within social care, criminal justice and charities, we all know that there needs to be big change, and people have been trying to make big change for years and years and years, and big change is happening, but it happens slowly, and that's why I'm on the parliamentary committee, because I believe in big change, but it happens slowly, and I'm not willing to watch people fall through the cracks whilst that change is happening. And so Training for Influence is my on-the-ground, operational, immediate impact solution. If our facilitators and other people in other companies who deliver training within these sectors, they deliver really good training that influences in the way that Training for Influence does, because it has the same influences irrelevant of the subject you're teaching. So if more people are delivering training to people who are working on the front line in this way, those people will have the skills and the ability that they need to deliver these services. That's my mission, that's my desire, that's what I want to achieve. That doesn't exclude the fact that everybody who attends any training or who delivers any training can benefit from the methodology. And in fact, what we've done now, again, following your methodology to a T, is the fact that the book is now our flagship Train the Trainer program. And the program is a 12-week program, and people come to us to be trained in how to deliver training using our methodology, and they develop a course as they go through the 12 weeks, or they adapt a course that they've already delivered. And the people that come on that training course are not all people who work within these sectors, because the teachings, as I said, can have the same impact for anybody that delivers training. So, for instance, we've got 2 KPIs on it for this cohort. The cohort started last night, and we've got 2 KPIs on it. Neither of them work within this industry.
Yeah, cool.
But what I'm doing and what my mission is very much about, again, still ending that cycle of abuse for people. And it has brought that. You know, I find myself talking all of the time in education kind of settings and talking about training and just ranting about the fact that delivering training should be a privilege. It isn't a case that, you know, people go, oh, I've got to deliver training tomorrow, or oh, I've been asked to deliver training in this subject. Delivering training is an utter privilege. You've got people in front of you who are listening to what you're saying for 1 hour, for 8 hours, whatever it is. They've given you their time and their money, and they're trusting you with that. And actually, we're building a mission and a community of people who want to be the very best trainer they can be. They recognise that privilege. And then within that community, we've got continued kind of CPD for them as trainers, because ironically, what's really funny in this world is once you get a training qualification, whether it's a year ago or 20 years ago, people then call you a trainer, and you're a trainer for life. And you can train anything, Glenn, do you know? And
Yeah.
that's kind of what the perspective is from the outside world. And it's just not true. We need to keep challenging ourselves and learning and developing as well. Do you know, we need to walk the walk if we're going to train other people. And that's not unique to these sectors at all. But for me, it was very important that I consider and continue to kind of lead and focus on my mission, my purpose. And going back to that, when I did that jump between charity to business, do you know, that recognition that actually this developing in this way, developing the mission in this way, is giving back to society in a far huger way than actually I would have done in my previous role. And that recognition of the more people, like now we give away more free training to smaller charities. For instance, we have charities of the year. Every time we send a card to somebody, there's a donation that goes somewhere else. We can do all of that because of the business. And the business isn't just about these sectors, it's about training being the best it can be. So we're attracting also corporate clients, do you know, people that really want to be seen as the very best in their space, and recognise really as well, really importantly at the moment, they recognise how live online training can be dire. Do you know, it really can be dire.
Really can be.
We were all really patient with each
It's a
other.
good word for it, dire. Yeah.
Well, we were all really patient with each other at the beginning of the pandemic, but now it's like, for goodness
It's like,
sake, come on.
mute button. Seriously.
Yeah, exactly. And so helping people to develop training that kind of exceeds all expectations, and particularly from that live online space, is really exciting, and see the impact that has. But it doesn't take me away from my initial mission.
I love it. What else are some of the, like, putting you now your entrepreneur hat on? What are some of the other, I guess, levers or force multipliers that you've found have had a real effect? Because a lot of people listening are also like looking for ways to kind of walk the path that you've quite recently walked, to increase their income and increase their revenue and make more of an impact. But from that kind of entrepreneur space, what are some of the things that you found that have made a big difference?
Oh gosh, so I think my first thing is, going back to what we just said there, is don't stray too far from your mission. And there's been points where I've really been tempted to follow the money, really, and luckily for me, because I'm really so kind of connected to my values, I've managed to avoid doing that, but the temptation has been there. And I can see very clearly with hindsight that it would have been absolutely the wrong thing for me to do. But in the moment, I wasn't sure. So hold fast to what you're trying to achieve and why, but be willing to change the vehicle if you need to a little bit. Because I think that was a real crucial kind of moment. The two times that we really changed the vehicle is, one is recognizing that 𝗀𝗃, as a training company, we didn't want it to be so big that it could deliver all of the training in the world well, and so we changed the vehicle to a methodology that other people can use, and so that was one of the core elements of changing the vehicle. But also then the live online delivery, that has absolutely transformed the training company. It's transformed, and the way that we deliver internally, but also it's changed the development of the methodology, because we're now in a space where people are coming to us all of the time for us to teach them how to deliver our methodology live online, because they know that actually they're doing okay in the delivering training online space, but actually they're what they're not doing, and what we can help them do, is do the very best they can do as individuals or as an organization, and so people are coming to us now saying, please make me be the best. And that wouldn't have happened if we didn't change the vehicle from 𝗀𝗃 to the methodology, training for influence, and from being in our bracket of face-to-face training to being able to consider and develop and deliver live online training. So that flexibility. Environment is hugely important. My accountability group from KPI is still going. Big shout out to them, because I know that they'll all be listening. They're excited for me being here talking to you, and they are absolutely wonderful. They have just helped me grow continuously throughout this whole program, and we could have ended the accountability group 6-7 months ago now, but every single one of us we meet every 2 weeks without fail, and we're all completely different in completely different industries, and we get so much from being together and hearing each other's pain, hearing each other's successes, supporting each other, and also challenging each other. And that notion of accountability groups, I've never heard of it until I came to KPI. And on our Training for Influence 12-week course, guess what they all have, Glenn? They all have accountability groups.
I'm glad it's spreading. Like, it's a big deal. It makes a big difference, right? There's something about that peer-to-peer social. I mean, we're social creatures, right? So to have that tribe, you don't want to let down your tribe.
Exactly. And I think what's fantastic is if we think back to what I was saying at the beginning, that's what happened to me in college. Do you know, I was surrounded by different people with different perspectives who were challenging me, but also supporting me. So although I didn't know it at the time, that was kind of akin to an accountability group. Do you know, that was my environment changing. And, do you know, one of the things that you say, do you know, Daniel says, and other people say within the KPI community is, do you know, look at the 5 people that you spend most of your time with, do you know, and see how they're influencing you. And I'm just reading actually 𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗃's book after listening to your latest podcast, and I'd never, because I'm not in that space, I'd never even heard of him before, and then I listened to the Dent podcast and just went, this is somebody I want to know more about. And I'm just at the part within that book where he says exactly the same. Do you know, look at the negative influences in your life, look at the positive influences in your life, look at the people around you and choose wisely, because they are who you become. And I don't think a true word's been said. You know, you have to look at your environment, and so that's been hugely important for me. Also from the perspective of, so I suffer at different points with imposter syndrome. I struggle, like I said, struggled last night, whereas there's people who view me as really successful. I've made it. Do you know, people, I'm turning down opportunities now, which is a really exciting position to be in. And so people are like, wow, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing the other. And yet yesterday I was sat in the car crying. Do you know, so there's something human.
What do you reckon that is?
For me individually, or
no, well, that's probably the best place. That's probably the best place to start. Yeah, you know, like what like, but I mean, I'm also always curious about it. Just as what is it about people that makes us afraid of what and who we can become?
A few things I think for me individually is, one is I really care. I'm one of these people who absolutely has my heart on my sleeve. I come from a very authentic place, and you might not, and some people don't like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. And yes, I'll say it in a respectful, kind way, if it's something that isn't necessarily going to be received easily, but I will still say it. And so I am somebody that literally has my heart on my sleeve, and I'm very honest. And because of that, I really care what people think. I really care about other people's perceptions, and it's been a learning process for me to be able to recognise, particularly as I go through the process of more and more people kind of knowing who I am and contacting me and things like that. I've had to kind of go on this journey of recognising that actually not everybody is going to like what you do or agree with what you do or believe in what you do all of the time, because we are all different people. But still, of course, there's that worry that kind of surrounds that. And I think the best example of that actually is when, so my book has loads and loads of 5-star amazing reviews, ones that have made me cry. As I said, I'm very emotional, made me cry at just, you know, this has changed my life, this has done this, oh my gosh, all of those type of things. And it's got 1-star review, and there's no comment on the 1-star review, it's just a 1-star. And I posted in the KPI.
I can't get it out of my mind.
Yeah, you know, that evil person that went on there. That 1-star review, of course, that's what I see.
Yes.
Past all of those other good reviews.
Oh, we're funny creatures, aren't we?
Absolutely. But what's really interesting is I posted in the KPI group, and then Daniel posted something like, now you're in the 1-star club, you've not made it until you get there. Do you know, you have to have a negative review. And then somebody else posted something along the lines of, I can't even remember what book it was. It was something to do with Shakespeare, and then somebody else did Harry Potter or something like that. All of these really top ones, where it was like, look how many thousands of bad reviews these have got.
Yeah.
Do you know,
Hamlet, shite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Do you know, so I think so. There's part of me
What derivative nonsense?
But so yeah, there's part of me that cares too much what other people think, and I'm learning to lean into kind of, if I'm doing the very best that I can do, if hand on heart I'm giving what I can give, that's enough. And if that's not enough for the next person, that's on them, not on me. And I'm having to lean into that a little bit. That without a doubt, no, with my background in psychology, I know that some of my own personal responses come from the fact that as a child, nobody had faith in me. And so there's some of that without a doubt that is trauma informed, and I'm teaching myself to have faith in myself, if that makes sense. So it's a real interesting psychological process. But I think as human beings, we put ourselves in these situations, don't we? We put ourselves in this difficult position. I don't need to be running this flagship program. I've chosen to do it because I like that challenge and I want that impact. And because what we're teaching people is absolutely transformational, and I fundamentally believe that. And so I think there's something akin with what you guys also say about sales is, like, I felt really, really, really icky about doing any sales. And then I felt really stupid when I was in the sales day at Dent. And something really obvious was said that was about if you've got something amazing that makes all of this difference and you're not telling people about it, surely that's worse. And I just kind of sat there going, you idiot, how have you not realised that?
It's like, I've got the cure for cancer. Why don't you tell people about it? Oh,
yeah,
that'd be crass.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's just been these kind of huge mic drop moments that, whilst alongside all of this, I've also had to learn how to actually run a business. There's a lot to it. It's complicated stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's a pain in the ass.
Exactly. All of this is happening, and we've trebled in size with income and with impact. We've got this flagship program. We're going through a process of it becoming an internationally recognised off-qual qualification. We've got huge aspirations, and I've got to run a business.
One of the best feelings was when I got to the point where I could have someone else running the business. I realized quite early on that I'm not the running the business guy. I'm kind of like you. I'm good at taking people and ideas and smushing them together. That sets people off in a bit of a different direction. That's what I love, playing in that world. Like running a business, making strategic organizational decisions and blah, 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 blah. Just not good at it. But many people are, and they can't do the stuff that I can do. They can't do the creative stuff. They can't do the communication stuff and what have you. And so I don't think that's going to be very far away. And I say this to everybody: plan to get someone else, because typically people don't do KPI or don't listen to this podcast that are, full systems nerds that just want to be, running processes and routines all day. They're not people that want to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It drives them nuts. And so my advice to those people is start thinking about how you get yourself someone else to run your business real soon. Because the speed at which you'll then be able to grow, because you're out doing the fun stuff, is just so much faster. And it's weird. You end up having more fun. You end up making more money by spending way more time doing what you actually like and enjoy. And it's like That's where it all starts to come together.
And we're on the cusp of that, and I feel very fortunate because I have the most amazing co-director, 𝗱𝗂𝗀𝗀. So we are training because we're not very creative, and it's Tammy and 𝗱𝗀𝗀. And when I joined the business full time, she stepped away from it. So we made that decision from a financial perspective. We could only manage one of us. And then in January just gone, she's stepped back in 2 days a week, and the plan is for her to be full time. She is absolutely an integrator. I can't even get her to do a podcast with me on our own podcast. She really does not like that type of stuff, but she's just phenomenal at that integration, that strategic, that people. She has got that in spades in a way where I sit back in awe, just going, wow, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Yet what I do fills her full of fear. She will not even entertain it. So our desire is to bring her back in full time, and we're aiming for the end of this summer for her to be back full time. And then we've built a central team. So we now have 2 people in the central team, and then we have 2 Kickstarters that are about to join, which is a UK government project where they'll pay for 6 months for 2 young people between the ages 16 and 25 to work within your business 25 hours a week for 6 months, and the government will pay. So we're building our central team, but it's been a real balance because, very honestly, all of the profit from growing the business has gone into firming the methodology, getting it right, ensuring it's correct, writing and publishing the book, and then developing the Train the Trainer program, because that is becoming our flagship product now. We only run it 3 times a year, and it's an application process, and we decide who's appropriate to go on it based on their connected experience to their subject and their values led, what they're aiming for, because we're building it so that it's going to be, as I said, an off-qual qualification. So we're looking at it becoming an internationally recognised level 5 Train the Trainer qualification, and it's going to be, it's building as a quality standard. You know, we want people to be able to say when they're booking training, we want them to be able to see the Training for Influence stamp and know that they're going to get an expert who's going to tailor the training. It's going to be interactive and engaging, but fundamentally it's going to be values led. And so we're building it into something that absolutely rivals other Train the Trainer qualifications out there, because literally none of them do what we're aiming to do, or what we already do, but we're aiming to formalise. And there is no other training qualification that offers continual CPD or a community. And so it's a really, really exciting space to be in, but we have really big plans for it. We have just put in for some government funding to be able to take on a project manager to be able to specifically do this. And I'm working with David Horn, who I know is he FD of Dent?
CFO.
Yeah.
FD,
so
financial director. Yep. Well.
Yeah.
CFO, not director. So.
Yes, so I'm working with David to look at raising funds specifically, because we have everything in place ready to scale and have all of the evidence to show of the impact. And we want trainers, whether you're within our sectors or not, we want them to be drawn to us to do our qualification because of the impact that it will have on their delegates. So aligning all of that up means that although we've trebled, we haven't got an abundance of money floating about. So that's why we're looking now at that next step.
Growth sucks cash. It's weird. Everyone thinks like, oh, I'm growing, I should have cash everywhere. It's like, I've got less cash now than when I wasn't growing. It's like, yep.
Yeah.
It's kind of how it works. When we became one of the top 10 fastest growing companies in Australia, we had less cash than we'd ever had. And when we slowed down, everything just turns back on. So, the beauty is, what I'm seeing and what I wanted to just congratulate you on is the assets you've developed, everything that you've done, like the book, the TED Talk, like the methodology that you've created, the programs that you've created. All that stuff's done now. and you've got fanatical fans everywhere, and that's just really cool. I wanted to ask if you could go back in time and whisper in Tammy's ear a little bit of advice, like if you wanted to go back and talk to your old self or your younger self, when would you go back in time to, and what would you say?
Do you know, Glenn, I listened to your little pre-podcast video, and I knew this was coming, and I've listened to your podcast, so I knew this was coming as well. And so I thought, and the difficulty with this is that actually now, sitting in this space, when I look back, I think that everything I did has led me to here. And so I think if I changed anything, because like my gut feeling, what I wanted to say was, from a business perspective, I should have made the jump sooner. And I should have had faith in myself, and bearing in mind that I was working a good 80 hours a week with a full-time job in the charity sector, a really intensive full-time job working with high-risk people within the charity sector, and building a training business, and had 2 young children and a husband. And so I think back to that time and I think, how on earth did I do it? Why didn't I have faith sooner? But actually, when I got to KPI, one of the things that I got to sit back really smugly and just kind of go, was when Daniel said, right, let's all do this exercise where we're thinking about our mountain of value. Let's work out where we can get the testimonials from. Let's work out where we can, who knows us and knows what we're achieving and things like that. Let's really kind of focus in on that so that we can recognise this mountain of value. I was spoilt for choice because we had this accidental business for 2.5 years previously. And so we had thousands of testimonials and thousands of people ready to say they're bloody brilliant. And that was before, like, although the business has been around officially, I guess, all that time, I have a mentor that I work with, and one of the things that they've helped me reframe in my mind, because I beat myself up about what I'm not doing and what I haven't achieved all of the time, and one of the things that they're doing is they're making me reframe it. And one of the things that we've reframed is the fact that actually the business started in November 2019. And so when I'm beating myself up about the fact that we haven't got a CRM, we have now, but when I'm beating myself up about it, and other people are saying, well, we've got thousands of people on our mailing list, and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't even know I needed a mailing list. We just turned up to deliver training. Do
they still do mail these days?
There's been loads of points within this journey where I've just felt absolutely stupid. Literally gone like, that is so obvious. We've delivered for all of these people. Why didn't we keep their email addresses? Why aren't we telling them that we've got a new course open? Why aren't we? Glenn, I literally this year, in January of this year, so this year, had my first ever follow-up calls with current customers to see whether we could, see whether we were meeting their needs and see if we can upsell. And guess what? Most of them bought loads more.
It's funny, isn't it? It's sometimes it's like the obvious, it's the obvious stuff, but we're so close to it. And we're so distracted with all the other bits and pieces going on. And yet sometimes there's just these little, just pull that lever and the door just flies right open. But you need someone else to point it out sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was doing all of that stuff of like, we've got a brilliant website and social media and this and that. And, to attract people in that I just hadn't seen what was under my nose, and so when I look back and think, what would I whisper in the ear of kind of Tammy way back when, I think I'd probably just say, enjoy it a bit more. Enjoy where you're at, because actually you're a master of your own fate, and I'm always going to be busy and I'm always going to be under pressure because I'm an all or nothing person. If I'm not busy and under pressure, then I'm doing bugger all. There is no middle ground for me, and so I'm always going to be like that. So enjoy it more, recognize that where I'm sitting today, I'm sitting here because I've chosen to be here, and that pressure is part of what is absolutely fulfilling me and taking me to the next stage.
What do you think that girl sitting in that suicidal girl sitting in the cupboard at university would say if she could see you now?
Honestly, I think she'd probably just laugh out loud. Really, really do. And I love it, Glenn. I love having those conversations. One of the things that I do really value about myself is that I can talk to anybody. So on my way into Parliament, I will sit and I'll chat with the homeless person before I go in. And I love having conversations with young people they're literally threatening people and spitting in their faces. And then I'm going in and having conversations and de-escalating it. And but also challenging parliamentarians, over their behaviour and things like that. I love the fact that I can have those conversations, and I can have those conversations because I was that young girl sitting in that wardrobe feeling suicidal, and because I have gone through so many different demographics, so many different communities of people, and that's fundamentally why I believe so much in people as an individual. That's why I really value the time you're giving me today as an individual, as a person. And that's why I really couldn't care whether somebody is the janitor of a school or a parliamentarian. Actually, what I care about is how you treat people. And from a training perspective, I will help you deliver the very best training, but what you need to bring to the party is the right values. And that's fundamentally where everything lands for me.
Well, I think the name of your TED Talk, Why Kindness Makes All the Difference, really just sums you up. And I think it comes all the way back that, I can see it. I can see the story from Jane meeting you for that first moment, and it's rubbed off. And I just want to say, thank you. I want to say thank you for everything that you do, everything that you've done. Business isn't easy. Being a key person of influence is even less easy because, we have to put ourselves out there. We have to face the imposter monster and the doubt and the naysayers and the trolls and the one-star reviews and the comments on Facebook that are just like, whoa, I don't want to anyway. I just wanted to say how cool it is to see how quickly you've been able to sort of bring this stuff together and to make a real difference. You're awesome.
Oh, well, Glenn, I want to kind of send that straight back at you because Dent has been a really important part of my journey, and it has, at a time, it's allowed me to go on a journey that I've needed to go on and supported me in a way that I needed supporting. And I have big plans, there'll be no surprise to you, and being an entrepreneur, being in the business world and feeling like I belong is going to enable those plans. Actually, the difficulty within the charity sector, the difficulty within the statutory sector was there was a ceiling. There's no ceiling here. And because there is no ceiling, I absolutely will change the face of training. I will help people recognize that training can be phenomenal. They can deliver it, and they should expect to attend phenomenal training. And alongside that, we will make a difference to people who are accessing complex services as well. And that excites me. When I leave this world, that's what I want to leave behind with my amazing children. I want to leave behind, if we've positively impacted, or if somebody that's been on a training course who has been on a training course trained by somebody who uses the methodology, then receives the response or the service or whatever they need, that's it. That's job done for me. I just think that's a privilege.
Well, I think you've already achieved that, so that's cool. And I don't think I've ever met anyone as passionate about training as you. You're just lit.
Because people don't realise the power it has, Glenn.
I know. I agree. It's just oozing from you in a really beautiful way. I love it. How can people reach out? How can people get in touch? And are there any sort of final words?
So I guess so people can get in touch with me. I'm on every social media platform, but I love LinkedIn.
Are you on
I really
TikTok?
like. As of yesterday, and my 15-year-old daughter is taking control of TikTok, and she's putting little bite-sized bits on there. So
Oh, really? So
yeah,
you are on
really
TikTok.
seriously.
So you're
She's
literally
just
on every platform. Got it.
She's just started doing it, but yeah. So, but it won't be me on TikTok, trust me. But you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on Facebook. You can go across to our website, which is Training for Influence. You can do our scorecard, which
Is
is
that
on there.
trainingforinfluence.co.uk?
It is, yes, and it's a number 4 in the middle. Or you can go to 𝗀𝗃training.org.uk, which talks about what the training company does. My books are in every good bookstore.
I love it.
And hopefully, if my plans go right, I will be in Australia later this year because it's my favourite place in the world. So you
Wow.
can even see me there.
If all goes well, we would love to be able to have you here. That would be fantastic. And of course, anyone can just Google Tammy Banks Dent Podcast. Bam, you'll find the show notes. All those links will be there. TB, any final words?
I guess my final words would be: have faith in yourself. Do what your heart is telling you to do. And if you deliver training, recognise that it's an absolute privilege and has the ability to transform lives.
Awesome. I'll say, if anyone's been listening to this and is like, "Oh, I want to get myself that Key Person of Influence book," we'll give you one. So go to 𝗱𝗃𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀.com, clever URL. Follow the little rabbit hole. Get yourself a copy of the Key Person of Influence book. Tammy, I'm so glad it's had an impact. It's had a huge impact on my life. I'm glad it's had a huge impact on yours, and it's allowing you to have a huge impact on others as well. Some final words from me would be brave, have fun, and go make a dent in the universe. Thank you, Tammy.